We are all after information. The hot thing that's been all across the country is, you've heard it on the radio, the pundits on the talk radio and wherever across, there's books about it. We got to get our runaway country, our government, under control. And one of the things that has come up is what they call an Article 5 constitutional convention, but it's not a convention. It's an Article 5 convention, and for the states to amend the Constitution. And it sounds really good. There's a lot of good amendments. There's also some downsides to them. We need to see the whole story. We get so frustrated and so excited about doing something to stop our runaway government that we can be drawn into something without realizing what we're getting into. As a result, gentleman, he's been with the John Birch Society, and they've done a lot of analysis of it, looked at it, and from the information standpoint, they're kind of like us. They want to get information out there and let us make our decisions. And they've looked at the Article 5 and what it means in the Constitution and what it can do for us and maybe what it might not do for us. Mr. Maddox, would you come and give us your analysis and presentation of Article 5, and then afterwards we'll have a discussion time. Are there other options maybe?
Thank you, Dexter. Wow, this is just humbling. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Debbie. Thank you, Dexter. Raymond, amen. Appreciate your words. What a wonderful opportunity. What a beautiful drive over here. I got to say, I feel like I'm at home here. If I had my way, I'd be speaking to groups like this every day. I'm a farm boy from north central Montana. You know, I live in the big city now in the hippie commune they call Cheyenne Canyon in Colorado Springs. And it's been a little bit of a culture shock for me, to say the least. But as I'm driving through the towns on the way here, I really did feel like I was just coming home. And a warm reception here. People actually wave at you on the road, no clue who I am, but they wave anyway, and that reminds me of home. So thank you so much for such a warm welcome. As was stated, I am the state coordinator for the John Birch Society here in Colorado. If you don't know who the John Birch Society is, we are the people, in a nutshell, we are the people who have been telling you since 1958 that there's communists in the White House. The great thing is in the last 6 years, approximately, and I won't mention any names, people have started to listen to us. So, yeah, so anyway, appreciate a few of you laughing. That usually does get a few people laughing. For those of you who didn't laugh, let me just remind you, you got in here for free. And maybe it's time to lighten up just a little bit. So bear with me, all right? Let's see. Beautiful drive over. The Lord, however, has a funny way of humbling you. You know, you think you're cool and having a great day, and on the way over, somehow I lost a button off my jacket, and the nice, clean, pressed shirt my wife sent me out the door with has got stains all. I don't even know where they came from. But anyway, that was a great steak sandwich. That's probably what did it. So anyway, yeah, that's where we're at. Folks, let's see. The John Birch Society, founded in 1958 by this gentleman right here. That man is Robert Welsh. He was a brilliant man, came up through his education, just hit the high points. He graduated from high school and college at a very young age, attended the Naval Academy, and he wanted to do what many Americans want to do, and that is go into business. And that's what he did with his brother. And they founded a company that I'm sure all of us in this room have contributed to, and that was Welsh's Candy Company. So if you've ever had sugar daddies or sugar babies or whatever, you've spent some money on this man's product. He was also very interested in politics and government, and as he studied what was going on, he became increasingly aware and alarmed that there was a global worldwide conspiracy working to undermine this nation, our Constitution, our freedom, the moral principles that we were founded upon. And he decided that he needed to do something about it, so he founded the John Birch Society. Again, that started in 1958. I love it when people tell me that, yeah, I've been around the John Birch Society. I was even around when John Birch himself was there. And sometimes I bring it up, sometimes I don't. It just depends on the person. But John Birch actually passed away some 13 years before the first chapter of the John Birch Society was founded. So who was John Birch? John Birch was a young man from Georgia. He went to seminary and became a missionary, was a Baptist missionary, and went to China. And was working hard in China when World War II came along. And John Birch was instrumental in the rescue of Colonel Doolittle and his raiders. You remember they bombed Tokyo. They figured out how to get a B-25 off an aircraft carrier, but they couldn't turn around and get back on it. So their plan was to bomb Tokyo, and if they survived that, to keep on going and shoot for China, which most of them made it, and they bailed out over China. And that's when their troubles began. And that's a fascinating history. I'd encourage you to read it. But in a nutshell, John Birch was in the right place at the right time to help those guys escape. And when he did that, his heroic endeavor came under the attention of General Chennault, who, if you remember, was the commander of the Flying Tigers. And General Chennault got an audience with John Birch and asked him if he'd be willing to serve in the military. And John said, well, if you need a chaplain, I'd be happy to serve. And General Chennault said, I've got a chaplain. What I need is a man who knows the country and knows the language. And so John accepted and took a commission as a second lieutenant and proceeded to set up an intelligence system for General Chennault. And he spent World War II risking his life time and time again in service to this country. There's a book written by Robert Welsh about the life of John Birch. It's one of the most emotional books I've ever read. It's a wonderful story of a young boy, an American hero. This man crawled on his belly through the middle of the enemy to call in airstrikes to help the Flying Tigers be more effective, other units as well. The Flying Tigers who became the 14th Air Force. Oftentimes calling airstrikes in nearly on top of himself because he was surrounded by the enemy. Was eventually promoted to captain and was very highly decorated. Sometime after the war, within a couple of weeks after the war, he was sent on a mission to meet with communist Chinese officials. And while en route, he was stopped by officers of the Chinese Communist Army. He and a Chinese officer were taken from their group and into a building, and John was asked to give up his sidearm, which he refused. And so they shot both him and his Chinese colleague, wounded him in the legs. And they drug him out behind the building and bayoneted them both. And John was killed. And somehow, miraculously, his Chinese colleague survived. Their bodies were found in a ditch later that evening by Chinese citizens. And had the Chinese officer not survived, we'd still not probably know what happened to John Birch. But because the communists were our friends, the State Department covered up the whole incident. And Robert Welsh and friends of his in the State Department eventually uncovered the truth. And when Robert Welsh was looking to start the John Birch Society, he was fascinated by the story of John Birch and felt like he epitomized everything, all the principles that he wanted to found this society upon. And so that's why we're called the John Birch Society. A lot more to that story. I encourage you to read it, but that's basically the bullet points. Now, we're involved in a couple things. One thing is on a federal level, the national level would be a couple trade agreements that are being pushed through. One's the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the other is the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. These are two trade agreements that would make NAFTA look like kindergarten. I encourage you to educate yourself on what those entail. One would be a partnership that would would lock us up with most of the Pacific Rim nations. The other one would partner us with the European Union. And these things would be a very bad hit to our sovereignty, to our Constitution, just not a good deal all around. And it's an effort to globalize our world into regional governments and eventually a global government. There's no other way of explaining it. The other thing we're working on is, at the state level, is, and that's what I'm here to speak about tonight, is an Article 5 convention, which we are opposed to. And I'll get into why here in just a minute. Let's see. See if I can get out of this and go to that, and go to that, and go to that. Now, just one of the things we're working on. You know, the John Birch Society, like I said, has been around since 1958. And folks, not much has changed other than the fact that the would-be detractors of our nation have become more emboldened and rabid in their approach. We are adrift in a political, immoral mess, a sea of filth, as I see it. And the John Birch Society has been the rock in the middle of this sea of filth and immorality and shifting values that has not moved. And many, many people are joining the John Birch Society. And the best explanation I can give you as to why is because we are that rock that has not moved, and people are looking for firm foundation to put their feet on. And that is what we are. And I don't care what 1,000 times 1,000 liars on the internet have to say about it. Well, let's talk about Article 5. Is it a solution, or are we being seduced into a situation that would not be good for any of us? That's the question. And that's really what I want to do tonight, folks, is just ask you questions. And you're bright people. You can come up with probably most of these answers on your own. Constitutional Convention, also known as a CONCON, Amendments Convention, the Convention of the States, the Article 5 Convention. Let's see here. Hang on just one second. Let me make sure I keep my place here. I don't have my wife here to keep me in line, so I gotta slow down and make sure I'm doing my job right. I rely on her for just about everything. So that's what. See, there's some of the things that you'll hear it referred to as. I thought I should warn you that before I flip to this one, that you're about to be in the presence of greatness. The great one, Mark Levin. I don't know why anybody would ever call into this man's radio station. You know, the great thing I love about Mark is the louder he talks, and the more worked up he gets, and the more he treats people like crap, the more valid his argument is. I can't take him. But anyway, people listen to him. And these are some of the other organizations that are also in favor of an Article 5 convention. Here in Colorado, probably the Convention of the States are the folks you're going to see the most of. And they're spending a lot of money on Colorado. A lot of money. And they're hitting anybody that'll listen to them. You know, I'll talk about some of the people that are in their group and kind of a little bit that I know about them here in a little bit. But these are the big movers and shakers in the movement towards an Article 5 convention. But who else is interested in an Article 5 convention? Anybody know who that is? Is this a George Soros fan club here? No? Now here's another, like I said, I'm here to ask questions. Why on earth would George Soros be interested in an Article 5 convention? All right. Any number of answers, none of which that I've come up with, like yours, sir, are good ones. Who else is interested in Article 5 convention? Recognize any of these outfits? These are all organizations, and I've found more since I put this series together, that are at least have expressed interest in an Article 5 convention and or have put a lot of money towards pushing for it. Now, why on earth would Wolfpack be interested in an Article 5 convention? MoveOn.org, the Sierra Club, Code Pink, why on earth would they want an Article 5 convention? I've got my answers. It doesn't matter, though. I want you to think about that. Progressive Democrats of America, if you've looked into those folks, I don't want these people to have sway over the rights that Raymond just talked to us about. No way. Anyhow, that's about where that's at. Like I said, there's more that I found, but that's who I had when I put this together. Let's talk about Article 5 itself. Who are the players? We have the state legislators, we have Congress, and we have the convention itself. The Congress, on application of the legislatures of 2/3 of the several states, shall call a convention for proposing amendments. So the state legislators, on application of the legislators of the 2/3 of the states, so what do? They apply. That's their job. Application of the legislators. Once it's applied for, we go over to Congress, who shall call the convention. That's what they do. Also in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18, it says, Congress shall have power to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for the carrying into execution the foregoing powers and all other powers vested by this Constitution. So what's that say? That means that Congress also can make all laws for calling the convention. Well, that's what they get to do. Now the convention, let's see, legislature 2/3 of the states shall call a convention for proposing amendments. So according to Article 5, that's what they get to do, is propose amendments. Who knows what that'll be? Who knows who that'll be? Again, more questions. Article 5 doesn't say. That's a big question mark. That's a big mystery. And my opponents, who I've had point and counterpoint presentations with, have even agreed with me on that. We don't know who these people will be. Now, I know there's people's ideas, and they'll tell you read this and read that. But that's just ideas. That's not law. That's not what the Constitution says. That's not what Article 5 says. It doesn't specify that. One guy from the Convention of the States made a claim that I was blown back by. He said the governor of the state chooses the delegates to the convention. Well, number one, I've read Article 5. Nowhere in there does it say that. And number two, did you just tell me, let's say that is true, did you just tell me that Hickenlooper is going to choose the delegates? Again, folks, who are these people? And what are they going to propose? Which shall be valid to all intents and purposes as part of this Constitution when ratified by the legislators of 3/4 of the several states. So we go back to the state legislators. That's the first way that amendments, again, whatever they are, can be ratified, is by your legislators. That bastion of conservatism. Again, Raymond posed a question. Do you want to gamble with your Constitution? Do you want to explore an alternative? I can't remember your question exact, Raymond, but that's kind of what I got from it. I don't know the last time you were in Denver up at the state capitol. I was just there the other day. Been there a couple times in the last few weeks. I'm talking to these people. I don't want them near the Constitution, folks. And Colorado's a great state. Most states, you can't just walk in and talk to your representatives and senators. They usually sit behind a wall of security, and you have to make appointments, and they come out, and it's a big ordeal. In Colorado, it's really wonderful. I walk right in. And if they're in their office, I sit down and chit-chat with them. That's really kind of an odd thing. But Colorado, you can do that, at least for now. Well, let's keep going. Or, when ratified by the legislators 3/4 of the several states, or by conventions in 3/4 thereof. So there's a second ratification process. If they don't think they want to go with the first one, Congress can choose to go with the second one, or by conventions, so they can have a convention after the convention in each state. Now, if that's the way they go, who are those people going to be? Is it going to be me and you? Not if the list of people under George Soros have anything to say about it, and I imagine they will. They've pumped a lot of money into this thing. I don't think they're going to sit idly by while we make a more conservative and God-fearing Constitution. Please, folks, I'm a slow learner, but I get there eventually, I promise you. And I don't think that's a good deal. But again, who are these people if that is the way they go? Who chooses them? As the one or the other mode of ratification may be proposed by Congress. So another responsibility given to Congress. They get to choose. That bastion of conservatism and God-fearing men and women get to choose. And believe me, they'll analyze every individual that's involved in the process and the state legislators to see what's more likely to benefit their own purpose and agenda before they choose which one to go with. And if they do go with number 2, where the lobbyists are going to come out of the woodwork from a lot of folks who want you and I to go away. Yes, sir. So that's what Congress gets to do. Now, this is just something else I kind of threw in there. As I'm reading through the Constitution, I try to do that often. The ratification of the conventions of 9 states shall be sufficient for the establishment of this Constitution. That's Article 7. That was after Article 5 was written. So what on earth does that mean? That's in the Constitution. That's law. Would it only take 9 states now? Again, another unanswered question. 9 states. Well, we know I'm not a gambling man, but if I were, I'm pretty sure which way I'd bet on New York going, California going, Vermont, Florida. Shoot, my home state of Montana. You see the voting record of our elected officials there. You think Montana's a good old boy state? I'll get to that in a minute. So the convention, once called, which was the organization that came up with Article 7, the Constitutional Convention, they made up a new rule while in convention. So what would stop a convention from making up a new rule once they were called? To undo everything else on this board. Again, that's what would stop them from doing that? Another unanswered question. So let's talk about some claims of advocates of the convention. States can bypass Congress in the amendment process. Does it say that in Article 5? Well, states can apply. Article 5 says the states can apply, and if Congress gives them the privilege, they can ratify. But they don't make the rules. Article 5 says Congress makes the rules. So that's an unjust claim. States can propose amendments. I suppose they could try, but that's not a power enumerated to them by Article 5. Who proposes amendments? The convention does. That's what Article 5 says. So that's not really true. States can make the rules for calling a convention. What does Article 5 say about that? It does. It says Congress makes the rules. Sorry, Article 5 doesn't. Article 1 does. You're right, sir. I stand corrected. State voting power will be one state, one vote. I love this one. Show me in Article 5 where it says that. It doesn't. I read the Congressional Research Service report on Article 5. It came out, the most recent one was last year. Referring to the 41 bills introduced by Congress, appointment of convention delegates among the states was generally set at the formula provided for the Electoral College, with each state assigned a number equal to its combined Senate and House delegations. So Congress, who we've established, makes the rules for the convention. That's what they say the convention will be based on, is the Electoral College. How many delegates does that give Colorado? 9. How many for California? That bastion of conservatism. 50. Yeah, it's somewhere 55 to 58, somewhere in there. How about for New York? That bastion of conservatism. 68, I think. 60 something. And if you're relying on the good old boys, once again, and I'll show you this in a minute, Montana gets 3. Even if they all were staunch conservatives. 3 dudes. But Montana's not a bastion of conservatism. It's not anymore. So that's a false claim, according to Congress, who does make the laws for a convention, should it be called. So what is the root of the problem? Is it flaws in the Constitution? Is the Constitution a flawed document? I'm with Raymond. I'll tell you what, as long as I can remember, my family and my faith have taught me that the Constitution was given to us by men who were inspired by God. Men who were held back by God for a specific time and a purpose. Inspired by Him to give us the best form of government that man could have. And I testify to you that I believe that with my whole soul. I've been a member of the John Birch Society since 1992. In 1994, I decided to serve a mission for my church. I ended up in Eastern Europe, in a country called Romania. Romania suffered under 45 years of communism, the greatest evil ever perpetuated on man by Satan. And grew up in a patriot's home, and I had a little bit of a rebellious streak. You know, Dad was always preaching this stuff to me. Oh yeah, Dad, whatever. You know, I was a cool kid and had way too much going on to listen to the old man. As a young man in Eastern Europe, with the horror that I saw people living in, my first phone call home, I said to my dad, Dad, it's all true. Everything you've told me is true. And I've seen it with my own eyes, and you will never convince me that communism and its more deceptive little brother socialism is the way to go. I've been in the hospitals. I've been in the markets where there's little to no food, standing in line, people standing in line just hoping for something to eat. And the list goes on. I've seen it with my own eyes. And I'm here to tell you that the antithesis to what I saw there is the Constitution of the United States of America and this great nation. It's insulting to me to be told by men who think they're so damn smart that we have a problem with our Constitution. Since they've had a hold of it, you're right. We'll get into that in a minute. Is the root of the problem that we're ignoring the Constitution? I'm with you, Charles. Yeah. Every day. Turn on C-SPAN, turn on Fox News. I know a lot of well-meaning conservatives look at Fox News as the source of all their information. If you're familiar with the Council on Foreign Relations, the John Birch Society has been talking about those clowns for years. One of the greatest, most influential organizations that is working for a global government. Its members brought us the United Nations. Its members have been in filled most of the cabinets of every president since FDR. You don't have to take my word for anything. Just listen to what they say and what they and read what they print. Rupert Murdoch, the owner of Fox News, is a member, senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations. Anyhow, I got off on a little sidetrack there. I believe that's a little more of the problem. And the one thing that my opponents cannot get around is, even if they get what they want in changing the Constitution, the problem is you've got 535 guys now who don't follow the rules. What makes you think they're going to follow the rules with your new bright idea? Another question. I'll let you guys answer. How about ignorance of the Constitution? How about that? How many people have actually read the daggum thing? Well, I mean, just in general. I tell you, I'm sure everybody in this room is well read. One of the things I like to do in Colorado Springs especially, there's so much military there, I have an occasion to talk to military folks all the time. I ask them, what was the oath you took when you enlisted or when you were commissioned? I've yet to this day, in the hundreds of times I've asked that question, have been able to have somebody recite their oath to me. And so I'll pull it out of my pocket. I've got the enlisted and the officer's oath. And I'll read it to them. And in both oaths, there's language that says support and defend the Constitution. That's alluded to in their oaths. So I ask them, you took an oath to uphold and defend a piece of paper, actually written on 4 pieces of paper originally. Have you ever read it? And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to belittle or act like I'm smarter than our fighting men and women in the U.S. military. My intentions are to get them thinking like anybody else. The John Birch Society is not a political organization. We don't back candidates. We don't back parties. We're an educational organization. That's what we do. You can see it all over on that table right there. We educate people. Or we put education in your hands and you do with it what you want. Just like this spiel I'm giving you, you can think I'm full of smoke or you can believe me. That's up to you. But this is what the John Birch Society does, is we endeavor to educate people. But that's what I ask those men and women. Have you read it? A couple have that I've talked to over the years, but most have not. So you mean to tell me that you took an oath to defend a piece of paper that you've never read? Again, I just want you to think about that, sir or sergeant. And I get them thinking, so if you haven't read it, how would you recognize an unlawful war that you're being told to leave your family and go fight? How would you recognize an order from a senior NCO or an officer that's unconstitutional? And then we can go into further things like, well, did you take an oath to defend and support and defend the Constitution of the United Nations or the UN Charter? Well, guess what? Every war we fought, starting with Korea on, has not been declared by Congress, as the Constitution states. Again, there's no real gray area with me. Either we're following the Constitution or we're not. The Constitution says that Congress shall declare war. When was the last time that happened? World War II. Everything else that our young men have fought and died for were UN resolutions. I'm not saying they died in vain. Don't misquote me or think I'm going down the wrong road. But Congress did not send them. Got off on a sidetrack again, sorry. Ignorance of the Constitution. And I know older people like to say, well, kids these days. Well, I'm here to tell you folks, it's not just kids these days. Let's go down to the senior center and ask how many of them have read the Constitution. So what is the solution? Mr. Jefferson said, if a nation expects to be ignorant and free, it expects what never was and never will be. He also said, educate and inform the whole mass of the people. They are the only sure reliance for the preservation of our liberty. And that's what the John Birch Society is endeavoring to do, is to educate the voting mass, the people, so they can go to the voting booth knowing who they should elect. That's just one way. Another solution that I really like, and we've started to see more and more of this, is the powers of the states to nullify the crap that's being shoveled to us from Washington under the 10th Amendment. That's right, the Bill of Rights, as Raymond lined out for or explained to us, aren't really a list of rights given to us by the government. Our rights were given to us by our Creator. And that in itself is a profound statement, especially in the 1700s. Your rights are endowed to you by your Creator. I know a king in England who was raised from birth to think that he was God's anointed to give us our rights didn't really like that. Okay? But what that says is, here in the United States, your rights come from your Creator. Not from a king, not from any form of tyranny. And notice they said Creator. They didn't name a specific deity. Which means in the United States, you, as you go through this experience we call life, can determine for yourself who your Creator is. And whoever that is where your rights come from. Now, I believe my rights come from the Creator of this world, who is Jesus Christ. And the founders gave us a Bill of Rights, again, not a list that tell us what our rights are, but it's a list of thou shalt nots to the government. Thou shalt not do this, thou shalt not do that, because these rights are guaranteed to the citizens of this nation by our Creator. All the way up to the 10th Amendment that says, basically in effect, if we forgot anything here, you can't do that either. And so when you're talking to your state senators and legislators, remind them of that. You have the power to stop unconstitutional acts by the federal government in Denver. You can say, not in this house. And the only way that the federal government can go get around that is to invade us with their armies. I don't know about you folks, but I say bring it.
Got 45.
Speaking of guns, got a great story. Again, I live in a hippie commune. My neighbors love me. My John Birch Society sticker on my car, I've been egged, I've been vandalized. It's unbelievable. People who preach peace and love. But the great thing is, you go out to your mailbox wearing a tank top and have a .44 Magnum strapped to your hip, these people just go away. They just don't come around anymore. But anyhow, Halloween night, just this last Halloween, some of the other guys in the neighborhood and myself, we take our kids trick-or-treating in a group. And I don't know the last time you took kids or grandkids trick-or-treating. It's kind of like herding cats. And we were in the middle of this thing, and it's dark out. And I'm just trying to get kids down the street, and we get to this one gentleman's house, and I thought, that guy looks familiar. I just took a step back, and we were just down the street from my house. Oh, this is Pete Lee's house. Oh, hey, all right, cool. Hey, Pete, how many bullets did you say that I could carry again? And he's dropping candy in kids' bags, and he just looks up at me. The law says 15. Well, I'm carrying 16. I hope that doesn't bum you out. And I know he must have thought this was planned, but I promise you it wasn't, because another dad goes, oh, cool, what do you got there? And I told him, and he said, well, I'm carrying a Glock 19. It carries how many rounds. And then another dad pipes up, and he's got something on him, and Pete Lee is just, he couldn't get rid of us quick enough. He was just shoveling candy out the door, beat it, kids, get out of here. But yeah, Pete, making laws that the Constitution doesn't give you the power to make in the first place, it pisses me off. And I'm going to tell you about it. So let's see. What else do I got to show you? Let's go to this real quick, and we'll talk about or illustrate what I think the real problem is. So the 10th Amendment, that's one solution. Let's see what that button does. Hopefully what I want it to. The John Birch Society every 6 months puts out what's called the Freedom Index. This is a scorecard on Congress, on how they vote in line with the Constitution. Raymond was talking about this. What if it's only such and such percentage? If you remember that portion of his talk. This is our illustration of what you were talking about, Raymond. This is how we do it. We take 10 key votes that Congress was involved in the last 6 months, and we rate each elected official based on how they voted in line with the Constitution. Uh-oh. Hope that means I'm not getting kicked off. There we go. Let's see. So you can read this. I've got some copies of it out in my car. I'd be happy to give folks, or you can go on jbs.org and see a more updated version. We just came out with a new one this month. This one's from 6 months ago. But anyway, you can read through all the votes that we rated them on, and then you can come to the percentages here. So you can just look at those percentage numbers. Let's look at Colorado. I'll put Colorado as center in the spring as I can get it. That's kind of fuzzy. For those of you that have a hard time, let me see if I can. Well, it's DeJet, 40%, Paulus, 40, Tipton, 60, Gardner, 60, Lamborn, 70. Is that Kaufman, 50, and Perlmutter, 44. Perlmutter, I met him here a few months ago. Pretty amiable guy until you tell him you represent the John Birch Society. He gets all kinds of animated. But anyway, that's your percentages from your representatives, Colorado. Those numbers work for you? They don't work for me. The analogy I like to use is this. Again, I'll go back to Raymond's great talk. These men took oaths on the Bible in front of God and this nation, entrusted by us, the voters, to represent us and to defend. Again, they take an oath that says defend and uphold the Constitution. That's what they do. Just like I took an oath to my wife when we were married. I stood next to her and I took vows. And I promised her several things. One of which was to be faithful to her. And I wish she was here. You could see it's not a hard job. She's hot. I love her. She's beautiful. She's wonderful. She sends me out the door with nice, clean press shirts. She wants me to look good, and she does so much for me. She raises our kids. I've got the easy job. She has the hard job. We have 2 boys, 2 girls that we pulled out of park testing, by the way. The other day they were taking tests. I went into the principal and said, my kids aren't taking these tests. You're going to have to show a big fat 0. You're not going to get money from the state, from Common Core, for my kids. Anyhow, back to the oath I took with her, took to her, for her. How would I be doing if these were my numbers? After 18 years of marriage, faithful to her 40% of the time, how would I be doing? How about 95% of the time? 99% of the time? How would I be doing? So how do these clowns get away with it? That's their numbers. How about your senators? You know what their numbers are? Let's take a look. Oh, wait a minute. I want to show you something else. Let's see. We'll go to my home state of Montana. Let's see if I can find Montana. Might have to go down a little bit here. Montana. That good old boy state. Cowboys. Oh, maybe another page. Gosh dang it. Sorry, folks. Bear with me. There's Montana. Mr. Dane, 70%. All right. There are a few 100%. If you want to look through here, Mike Lee from Utah, he hit 100%. The funny thing, these guys don't want anything to do with the John Birch Society until they hit 100% on this thing, and then they invite us to come give them the plaque to hang up in their office showing that they got 100%. You'll see some 90. Most Republicans hover between 50 and 70% 40%. Most Democrats are 40 or less. Let's see. All right, we're into the Senate. And again, you can read through their votes that we voted them on. So here we go. There's Colorado, Mr. Udall and Mr. Bennett. Mr. Bennett, whose name I've heard mentioned a few times tonight. Mr. Udall, 0. Mr. Bennett, 10%. And he's actually up 10 from the last one. They were both goose eggs. So, folks, is the Constitution really the problem here? It's not. It's adherence, or the lack thereof, to the Constitution that's the real problem. Let me see if I got anything else to show you. How about this? Here's a cartoon that one of my bosses drew up. Article 5 convention. Your major players, Mr. Lessig, Mr. Ferris, Mr. Nadelson, lives right here in Colorado. Mr. Meckler. Now, these guys, if you look into their past, none of them are conservative. Nadelson, a law professor from the University of Montana, flaming liberal. Why on earth would he be interested in Article 5 convention? Why would Mr. Lessig be interested in the Article 5 convention? Well, I can tell you, he wants to get rid of the Second Amendment. That's his stated purpose. He's probably the nation's leader on the subject, or on the proponent side. Also been invited to the last couple Bilderberg group meetings. Now here's another question for you. Why on earth would the Bilderbergs be interested in talking to America's leader on wanting to change the Constitution? I'm with you. The rest of you can come up with your own answers. So what this is states going over the cliff, the Article 5 cliff, saying, we got to do something, we got to do something. That's what I always hear. Well, we're just in the worst shape. We got to do something. I'll tell you what, folks, I hate that. I get scared when I hear that. What happened the last time Republicans were screaming that we need to do something? We got to do something. Anybody remember the Patriot Act? And what happened 10 minutes after the Patriot Act? Department of Homeland Security, which was another step in nationalizing our police force. So these two parties that are supposed to be opposed to each other, the Republicans gave us those two things. The Democrats just took the ball and are running with it. Obama is working as hard as he can. It's actually stated, again, you don't have to take my word for anything. Obama has actually stated that we need to have a domestic military force as equally manned and gunned as our military is. Now, what on earth would we need them for? Again, just a question, folks. I'm just asking questions here. Yeah. How about the last time the Democrats were jumping up and down saying, we got to do something, we got to do something? What do we get? Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, or so-called Affordable Care Act. So, pardon me if I just get a little leery when I've got politicians screaming up and down, we've got to do something. Remember, those were George Armstrong Custer's last words. All right. So that's about where we're at, folks. We stopped it in Montana. The John Birch Society was the only people in the room who were against this. Many of the men in this cartoon were there. One of the legislators asked a question about the original Constitutional Convention. None of them knew the answer. He asked, does anybody in the room know the answer? My colleague, Robert Brown, raised his hand and ended up testifying for about a half an hour, and based on his testimony, Montana squashed this thing. Last week, Utah took it hook, line, and sinker. Every Republican voted for it. Every Democrat voted against it. Wrap your mind around that one. In Nevada, where we've defeated this several times, they just popped up another resolution to apply for a constitutional convention. Guess what? The Convention of the States, folks there had their elected officials that support them put it up for a vote without putting it on the docket, so nobody knew it was coming. And why on earth did they do that? I could go on and on, but I think you get the point. You understand where I'm standing on this thing and where the John Birch Society stands on it. Yes, ma'am.
There's about what is it and what do you know about the Constitution of the new United States that George Soros was supposed to be, they want to implement in 2020. Isn't that interesting? They already have that Constitution.
Yeah. You know who else has a constitution all ready to go? And I'll preface this by saying one of the last few weeks, the John Birch Society has posted this on our webpage. The Ferguson riots that went on all across the country. We got pictures of them, just off the mainstream media. Riots from L.A. to New York. And we at the John Birch Society looked at these pictures, and we noticed that they all had one thing in common. The signs the protesters were carrying were all exactly the same. Exactly the same. So remember, riots are very, very rarely, in fact, I'm not even sure of a time in history where a riot spontaneously happened. And that evidence shows that there was planning and organization. Nationwide, all these clowns are carrying the same signs. And if you go a step further and blow the pictures up and look at the fine print at the bottom of the signs, it says revcom.us. So we at the John Birch Society went another step further and looked up revcom.us. Who is that? Anybody got the internet on your phone? Go ahead and look it up. You don't have to take my word for anything. Revcom.us stands for Revolutionary Communist Party of the United States. Again, folks, don't take my word for anything. Look for yourselves. And you get on their webpage, you'll notice that they have a proposed constitution for the United States. And guess, when I mentioned there was other organizations that have expressed interest in an Article 5 convention since I put this together and I didn't have them listed, the Revolutionary Communist Party of the United States. And you can go on there and watch the video. Their ringleader, Bob Avakian, card-carrying communist, leading the rally, having people stand up to be recognized. The people we sent, not the people from, the people we sent to Ferguson, stand up, and they got a big ovation. The people we sent to name the town, wherever there was a riot, stand up and be recognized. Another organization that has a constitution all ready to go. Yes, sir.
How many states have made petitions?
I think we're at, Utah made 28, I think, is where we're at. 34.
No, it's not just
Yeah, some have been around for a while. But for some reason, lately, they have stepped up their game. And the John Birch Society, again, we've been fighting this thing for 30 years. I'm going to say that John Birch Society, oftentimes we stand up for things that, we were standing up against Common Core when people look at you nutty Birchers, what in the hell are you talking about? The federal government taking over our education, that'll never happen. Look where we're at, folks. And we've been saying, whoa, let's just stop and at least think about this Article 5 thing. Let's just examine who the players are, who's involved in this thing. What does Article 5 actually say? Let's cut everybody's ideas and projections and whatever out. Let's look at what the Constitution actually says, and then let's look at who the people are that want to get involved. And we're just asking you to stop and think. But they're probably outspending us 20,000 to 1 on this thing. They're putting a lot of money into this thing. We have picked up some allies from the Rocky Mountain gun owners. Dudley Brown and RMGO is fighting this thing now. And there's a couple others. So we're starting to gain a little bit of momentum, but that's about where we're at. You had a question, sir?
Yeah, they played their card. And so many people in America now are into the game.
Mm-hmm.
They know that they have to stick with what they have planned.
Yeah.
And move forward with it.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, it's amazing. I don't have to be the smartest guy in the room, and I know I'm not. I'm just sharing with you folks tonight what I've picked up from my study of this thing. I'm just asking questions. Again, you guys can come up with your own answers. But I think it's interesting. All I ask, the politicians in here in Colorado that are for this thing, I'll just ask them to read a trifold on it. And they oh, I'm for it. They won't even. All I'm asking you to do is read this, just to hear a different perspective, and they just flat refuse. And the other thing I find that's interesting is many of the individuals and organizations that are for an Article 5 convention don't say why. They just want one. So, yes, sir.
Now, a month ago,
Mm-hmm.
J. Paul Brown was the seventh Colorado legislator to sign on to the idea.
Mm-hmm.
What do you know about the progress beyond that in the last several weeks?
If I were a gambling man, and I'm not, based on the time I've spent amongst our Colorado elected officials, I think if it came up to a vote today, it would get shot down. I'll never say never, but we've got a lot. Probably Tim Neville is probably the leading guy who's against it, and there's quite a few guys that I think have expressed to me that have doubts and concerns. And I don't need you to be adamantly against it. I mean, shoot, the founders put Article 5 into the Constitution for a reason. Our Congress has been operating under Article 5 for over 200 years. But again, when you look at the players who want to be involved in this thing and you look at all the unanswered questions, we're just saying there's a better way. And I think the safer way is the 10th Amendment. And that's what we're endeavoring to educate our elected officials on, is the 10th Amendment, the power they have under the 10th Amendment. And so, again, to try to answer your question, let's see, Lambert, who covers North Colorado Springs, he's all for it, and Lundberg, those are the two Bobbsey twins that are all for this thing. I believe that they're right now working with the Convention of the States people to put together a application.
But you don't know how many have officially forced the idea beyond those.
I don't know for sure, but I think you're pretty close. I mean, I haven't gone to each individual and tallied up a number. The John Birch Society, we're not lobbyists. I can't go to the Capitol and lobby people. I can just go as a citizen and talk to my elected officials.
Who signs it and who supports it is two different things.
Yep, exactly. Yep, you're right. And that's why I would never gamble my sacred honor on which way it would go. I think if it happened right now, it would go in our favor. But the Convention of the States, and the other thing I have to go on is the money and the time that the Convention of the States people are pushing this thing in Colorado. I think they see the same thing. And that's why they're working so hard here.
I think that's the issue we have with the 10th Amendment, too. The states are going to be very reluctant to nullify anything because they've already accepted the money from the feds.
In many cases, Common Core being a prime example.
Common Core, I mean,
Yeah.
Hickenlooper hasn't
Yeah.
read anything beyond the title.
Right, and the problem with that is, and it's kind of been a reoccurring theme this evening, is, as you say, they're afraid of the federal government and what they're going to do. What they ought to be afraid of is us and what we're going to do. And that's what we need to change. Let me see if we have a trifold here, and I don't know if I have enough for everybody, but if you want one, you can come see me afterwards. It lists some of the people that are for this thing. Mr. Lessig, founder of Creative Commons, Ruth Stryker's the Stanford Center for Internet and Society, a law professor at Harvard Law School. His reasons for wanting a constitutional convention is to overturn the 2010 Citizens United Supreme Court ruling by the 28th Amendment and to completely rewrite the Constitution. That's his stated objective. Mary Penrose, law professor at A&M, she's a big proponent.
GOOH was a political party that more or less started about 4 years ago. We get out of our house attempt at forming a new political party is called America Again.
No, I'm not familiar. No, sir.
Yeah, I'm pretty sold on their agenda.
Good.
What they're laying out there. It's like we were sitting there listening to you guys talk.
Yeah.
Everything that you're laying out there.
I'll certainly look into them. I'm not familiar. I would just say, that if the numbers on that Freedom Index were all 100%, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. If we were following the Constitution, this wouldn't even be coming up. That's the other thing that my opponents can't get around, is if we were actually doing what their oaths of office say they should be doing, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. So again, the Constitution is not the problem. But America, am I about done, sir? I'll bail out as soon as you give me the hook. Just one final thought. Americans have fallen into a bad habit of wanting a quick, easy fix. We get sick, we want the pill that'll make us immediately well. We want the surgery, we want the app. Where's my app so I can fix this problem or get myself through this thing? Well, there's no easy solution here, folks. It has taken decades for the conspiracy working against us to get us where we are. And it's going to take a lot of hard work to get us back to where we should be. And that's the burden we bear as patriots. It's not easy being a patriot. It's not easy. It's not the easy road. Following Christ is not the easy road. It comes with sacrifice. It comes with work. And that applies also to following Christ's plan for a perfect government on this earth, and that's the Constitution. You want to stand up for it. Believe me, I'm not used to receptions like this. I get treated like crap most of the time. I was at a Tea Party meeting the other day. I'll never go back. I was so disgusted. I've never been treated so rudely in my life. And I have people that are completely on the opposite end of the spectrum, political spectrum from me, and I at least treat them with dignity and respect. Christ commanded us to love our enemies, and I pray every day that I have that ability when I'm in front of them, to love them. And give me the ability to talk to them in a manner that I can help them come from the bondage that they're in and walk into freedom's light. I would never treat anybody the way I get treated a lot, because I stand with the Constitution. Now, you can go home and live a comfortable life and mind your own business. If you don't want to get involved in your freedom, just know this. There's a global conspiracy working tirelessly every day to take your freedom away. If you don't want to get involved with them, just know this, they're involved with you. And that's all I have to say about that. Thank you, sir.